Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I would like to thank the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy for the honor of asking me to be here with you today. I would like to first of all express my doubt about whether I can fully complete the task I have been given to speak about tourism and tourism branding. Given this question is broad and much more complicated than it may seem, as its parameters are numerous and vastly diverse. First of all, what are we talking about? About tourism, of course, that is about a human activity in which people leave their normal residences by hundreds of millions each year for a minimum of 1 day and a maximum on 1 year without practicing a professional activity in the destination. One of the major characteristics of this phenomenon of human behavior is that has grown quite impressively over the last 5 decades with profound changes in the recent years. The figures and graphs which will illustrate these changes only deal with one aspect of tourism, as I will be focusing exclusively on international tourism. To have a good idea of the magnitude of this phenomenon, we must remember that domestic tourism represents between 73% in terms of overnight stays and 83% in terms of arrivals of the total of the global tourism industry. Thus, the following graphs and figures represent between 27 and 17 of global tourism. What are the major trends? First trend, tourism is constantly growing. The sector has increased from under 50 million international arrivals in 1950 to 530 million in 1995, 930 million in 2010, and our predictions indicate that this figure will be 1.6 billion in 2020. Second trend, for the past 50 years, each crisis has affected figures for 1 or 2 years, but has not affected overall trends. We already see that the 2009 crisis was the most severe that the tourism sector has seen yet. 2010 figures have already recovered from the crisis and should catch up with the overall trend within 1, 2, or 3 years. In blue, you can see the predictions for 2020 as we calculated them in 2000, and in red, the actual data. The table displays 2010 results as well as our prediction for 2011. We see clearly to what extent trends continue to accentuate the differences in rhythm and growth. This has clear consequences in terms of revenues and employment. What is at stake is the distribution of $852 billion through the global tourism sector. Behind this figure, tourism is an economic activity with substantial impact. Indeed, it creates jobs, about 250 million jobs worldwide. That is about 7% of the jobs in the world. It boosts diversification of economy, advanced as well as emerging ones. It generates tax revenues. It contributes to redistribution of wealth between countries and within countries. It is one of the very rare occasions for development of weak regions and regeneration of region in decay. It strongly boosts earning of foreign currency, balancing the balance of payments. Let's keep in mind, for example, that tourism represents 30%, I say 30%, of the worldwide service export. By the way, tourism has an important economic multiplier effect on several sectors like agriculture, handicraft, commerce, food industry, and so on. Third trend, while tourism is increasingly regarded as a major activity, the number of destinations is also increasing. In other words, as tourism grows, competition increases proportionally. Here we see the evolution over 15 years of the market shares in terms of numbers of international arrivals. Europe represented 58% of the market in 1995 and accounted for no more than 53% in 2009. During this time, Middle East doubled its share, Asia rose 5 points, while the Americas, notably on account of the United States, fell 4 points. This graph gives an idea of the evolution of parts of the markets, this time over a period of 30 years, and gives an idea of the competition with an overall contraction of Europe plus Americas and the development overall of Asia plus Africa plus the Middle East. In reality, competition is from now on between advanced and emerging countries. These parts are now becoming inversed. This growth in competition should be confirmed in the coming decades. And it should lead to the top 10 in 2020. We understand then the competitive importance of product quality, promotion, and therefore of branding. To put in another way, in a market in which long-term trends are strong and growing, and in which competitiveness is increasing rapidly, the questions of image, branding, and promotion become crucially important. By the way, when we speak of tourism, what are we really talking about? This phenomenon to which we have become accustomed and which appears quite simple is actually a combination of diverse activities. 5 major activities could be regarded to constitute what we call tourism. Firstly, transport, both for reaching a destination and irrigating its land. In other words, transport by air, rail, bus, car, taxi, public transportation, even bicycle now. The second element satisfies tourists' basic needs, that is, housing and feeding them. This is a task of hotels, vacations, rentals, campsite, B&Bs, lodges, houseboats, secondary residences, and so on, as well as restaurants. The third element is immense. It groups a variety of activities offered to and practiced by tourists. I have personally counted over 200 different activities, which can be grouped into 9 main families: cultural activities, physical and sport activities, discovery and adventure, entertainment activities such as nighttime activities and theme parks, shopping activities, religious tourism, health and wellness activities, beach, cruise and relaxation, business tourism activities, that is meeting, incentives, congress, and exhibition MICE in this acronym. Each of these activities adheres to particular codes, responds to specific demands, and generates its own images and representations. This is obviously does not simplify the task of tourism branding. The fourth element is often underestimated, although it is essential to the success or failure of a tourism destination. It deals with the management of public spaces or spatial management. In other words, all the norms and actions which contribute to creating an attractive and pleasant space, particularly to the urban planning rules, to the protection of landscapes, of the seashore, of mountain or urban prospects, as well as the protection and enhancement of historic monuments, of monumental heritage, facade, or the cleanliness of public spaces or waste management. Finally, the fifth element of tourism combines marketing, promotion and sales of products and of destinations. That is the work of tour operators, travel agencies, national or local tourism offices. The aggregation of these five elements constitutes a tourism destination. And each of these elements is made up of different components. The first one are grouped in what I would call the basic factors: economic pattern, chain value, funding and profitability, and mainly governance. The second one groups different features of factor of excellence: diversity and availability, quality, welcome and hospitality, sustainability, domestic tourism, ethics, consumers protection, tourism for all, poverty alleviation, safety and security, climate change concerns. And the third groups of components are what I would call the tools for a public policy in the tourism field, that is standards, statistics and trends, investment, human resource management and employment, education and training, crisis management and e-techniques. Things become complicated as we realize that the concept of a tourism destination is guided mainly by what I like to call a fractal principle. For a tourist from the Midwest, for example, in the US, or from Yunnan in China, traveling abroad for the first time, his or her destination could be Europe, that is to say, a continent. For a Japanese tourist who has already been to Europe, his or her destination could be Italy, that is a country. For an English tourist who has already been to Italy, his or her destination could be Tuscany, or another region or province. Finally, for a French tourist who has already been to Italy for several times, or perhaps for an Italian tourist, his or her destination could be Florence, or Rome, or Venice, that is a town, a municipality. These differences in representation of a destination's perimeter and content depend on several parameters, among which the most notable include a tourist's cultural proximity to the destination. Therefore, for example, the neighbor of the tourist from the Midwest, whom I mentioned a minute ago, could be a golf enthusiast. In this case, his destination would be not Europe, it would be the UK, but rather St. Andrews. And if his neighbor loves to surf, her destination would neither be Asia nor Indonesia, but instead Lanzarote Beach in the Mentawai Island in the north of Sumatra. If I insist on this fractal organization of destinations, it's because it complicates the question of branding. Actually, if each country, in the sense of a political entity as we usually understand, its character, images and representation, globalization and the increase of international displacement as well as the positive growth, they have the effect of superimposing subnational images, that is regional, provincial and local, to national images and characters. Here we measure the complexity of this idea. In this framework, a tourism brand is conceived and promoted. Simon Anholt, I think that he was one of your speakers in a previous conference here in ICD, who has produced extensive work on the subject of nation branding and competitive identity, defines branding as, I quote, the act of reducing something chaotic, complex, and contradictory to something simple, memorable, and potent. I must say that I fully agree with this definition, and Holt also underlines that tourism branding, in addition to tourism promotion, is just one of 6 main images and impressions perpetuated by a country. The 5 others being, first, images driven by the exports of products and services of a country, their quality as well as their defects. Second, government's political decisions, which have a strong impact on a country's image. Third, the perceived image of a country by business audience through promotion of investments or policies for attracting researchers or workers. Fourth, cultural exports and sports, which plays an increasing role worldwide now. Fifth, the people themselves, that is, travelers and tourists, who by behavior or speech perpetuate their country's image. Nevertheless, I think that the image driven by a tourism brand has the particularity of, contrary to the 5 other channels of dissemination, the immediate objective either to sell its tourism products or much more often to contribute to establishing what I would call a climate or an atmosphere, and I have to insist on these 2 words, which will facilitate the act of purchasing a tourism product. And this product is of no small importance, as it concerns with the buyers themselves, what they experience personally, where they decide to go when departing from their everyday life, how they seek out a feeling of security and well-being. This is therefore what I would call a strong product, because it implies the tourists themselves. We understand on this point how much the brand must be both convincing and trustworthy. I will add, noting the work of Mr. Kapferer, that a tourism brand follows 6 characteristics in defining identity. First, a destination physically, an island, a city, a mountain, a seashore. Second, its personality, which can be strong. New York, Andalusia, Bali, Rio de Janeiro have a very strong personalities. Third, the cultural universe, that is the system of values which legitimize products from the brand. McDonald's for the US, Singapore Airlines for Singapore, Volvo for Sweden, Le Louvre for Paris. Fourth, its reflection, that is the type of person with whom we associate the brand. Partygoers in Ibiza, even if Ibiza welcomes families. Gamblers in Las Vegas and Macau. Adventure seekers in the Sahara. Jet setters in Gstaad. Fifth, the type of relationships it encourages. A family setting in Bretagne. A high life feel in Saint-Tropez. A friendly atmosphere in Tunisia. An authentic experience in Peru. 6, its mentality, or the type of relationships we seek with ourselves in purchasing the brand. We could speak of peacefulness in the Seychelles, intensity in the falls of Lake Victoria, soul searchings in Bhutan, or excitement in Angkor temples, emotion in the Halong Bay. This list of characteristics is interesting, but each one must, I think, be used keeping in mind the 5 principal elements of a brand. First, the logo, which is its graphic representation. Second, the slogan, which synthesizes the essential trait or traits. Third, the explicit content, that is, the one which is immediately suggested either by the logo or by the slogan or by the launch campaigns for the brand. Fourth, what I would call the implicit content, which is indirectly suggested by the association of ideas and images with the explicit content. And fifth, the additional content, which builds on either past campaigns, depending on changes in context, or campaigns from or and for different markets. The difficulty, of course, is in generating these 5 elements of a brand in a coherent and credible manner, and this is clearly not an easy task. In this framework, allow me to propose 6 observations. First, tourism branding must above all define the destination's target or target by carefully examining the 2 targets' families, the individual targets. Do we see tourists themselves as final customers, or do we target prescribers, that is, tour operators or travel agencies? Or do we target mainly the media as the most important contributor? The second type of families of target are the geographical targets. Do we target all the potential tourists, including domestic tourists, or intra-regional markets? Remember that the intra-regional markets worldwide represent an average of 78% of international tourism. Or do we target long-haul markets, which represent only 20%, as the most important? It goes without saying that the cross-cutting of these 2 types of target families has a major influence on the tourism brand's conception and on the costs of development and promotion of the brand. Second observation, through these explicit or implicit contents, a brand is a promise which engages the promoter. And the promise must be kept, since if it is not, the impact could be quite negative when we understand, for example, that an European tourist will share his or her impressions on a holiday destination with 6 to 10 people. With the slogan, "Incredible India," India claims that it is incredible. If a tourist upon return from India speaks to the contrary, this objective will not have been achieved. Similarly, with the slogan, "Zimbabwe, a world of wonders," Zimbabwe holds itself up to a high standard to which it had better maintain. In other words, if a brand is to make people dream and stimulate the imagination, it must also be true. And the best method to be truthful is to reflect a destination's real character and never to invent one. Third observation, a brand must be stable and coherent. Even if its additional contents evolves over time, if it is enriched bit by bit, it does not have to contradict itself. As Oman, the Sultanate of Oman, declares in its slogan, "Beauty has an address." It doesn't take any risk. It is certain of the stability of its image. This is not always the case with a lot of brands. Moreover, it does not contradict the vision that inhabitants have of their own country. In this case, the encounter of tourists with the local population will produce negative friction. Fourth observation. My fourth observation is quite specific to tourism. It is directly linked to what I call a destination's fractal character. This implies that a brand must be applicable at different levels. In other words, a national brand with a national logo and a national slogan must be able to be applied to a provincial or a local destination. One of the best examples of this is the brand Spain used between 1995 and 2010. They changed their logo, their slogan last year in March. And at the time in which the slogan was "Smile, you are in Spain." Smile, you are in Spain. And this slogan was accompanied by a logo depicting a large stylized smile. I think you know it. Its explicit content was synonymous with happiness and joie de vivre. And its implicit content evoked sun, relaxation, and product quality satisfaction. Both the slogan and the logo were widely applicable at all levels, and they did it, provincial and local. And this, I mean, the ability to be applicable at three different levels will be increasingly advantageous for all destinations in the near future. My last observation is the one which seems most important. A tourism brand doesn't have the same consequences for everybody. Certainly, the concurrence is generally the same, but the outcomes are different. For a new destination, for example, by which tourism is a nascent activity, the brand is above all an instrument for existence. On the other hand, the brand will be the way of destination differentiates itself from its neighbors, especially from destinations which similar. For others, it is a way to, above all, maintain and protect a well-established image, which has already been well established in the embodiment of a brand. The differences in what is at stake must above all be appreciated as they are contingent upon both the state of the market of the concerned destination and the costs of brand development and above all costs of brand promotion. As in every other industry, one must appreciate the balance between the promotion of a brand and its costs and the development of products, which is quite different on the other hand. If we examine the global situation, some simple facts become clear. Western Europe countries, mainly led by France, Italy and Spain, and to a lesser extent the UK and Germany, already have a strong tourism image. It is not therefore about changing their image, but rather consolidating and reinforcing their strong points. Rather than just branding for these countries, it's above all about renewing their products through hard investment, and we are therefore much far from marketing. Such is not the case for Central and Eastern European countries, which must create in the same time both products and brands at once. This is essential for their existence as tourism destinations. Asia is in a yet another situation because, as a general rule, it's not true everywhere, but generally speaking, its products are rather good, even very good. Transport, accommodation, and activities, very famous and attractive. And its branding is essentially aimed at differentiating one destination from another. As destinations, they must also ask themselves the crucial fractal application question. Africa, excluding North Africa, I mean Tunisia and Morocco, which are in a very special situation, and excluding South Africa and Kenya, Africa, generally speaking, is also in a very different situation insofar as the primary objective is to build the two-thirds elements of tourism products, I mean transport and accommodation, which are unavoidable prerequisites for the construction of a brand. In regards to South America, the consolidation of domestic and regional markets is likely to be the main objective. It's not clear whether a long-haul branding policy should aim further, except in the case of the US. I will finish my comments with what I think is today's most exciting challenge, that which the US is currently facing. Never have we seen such a gap between a country's tourism potential, which is actually quite huge, probably one of the larger in the world, and its results, which fall disappointingly short of predictions. The impact of September 11 on international tourist arrival actually was never in fact compensated, which amounts to a loss of tens of billions of dollars, which the US has let slip away over the past 10 years. It's probably in this country where the challenge of image, of tourism branding and tourism promotion is most strongly felt. Last year, President Obama created a special fund for tourism promotion, taken from a fee charged to visitors from countries, including the visa waiver program, and we are looking forward to its results. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, such a vast subject cannot be fully addressed in an half an hour. I only hope to have been able to clarify certain aspects, and I thank you for your attention.